say that. Right. Very good. Psalm 37. One of my favorites. So much packed into this particular psalm. We'll be going through 22 verses, and we'll stop after that. Psalm 37. Fret not thyself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity. You know, it was mentioned in our Sunday school class that there's nothing new under the sun. And everything that we see today in our society, in our world, there's nothing new. Just as we see people who are Christ rejectors, God haters, Christian persecutors, and all the evil, the immorality in the world today, it's not new. Those kinds of people, and I'll just add this in, that we're not casting judgment against them, because, but for the grace of God, you know, we were like this. We didn't always believe in Jesus, unless you were raised in the Maney home, I suppose, at an earlier age. Okay, you don't have a long history of evil or wickedness that I know of, anyway. Of course, there was a distance that you were gone during the supposed to be school. But anyway, I'm sure you could have gotten in a lot of trouble, Philip. You do?
For sure.
For sure, yes.
Yeah, the one time I walked around the block.
Yes, the one time.
Really mad that time.
He was so frustrated as a teenager. He was so frustrated he had to blow off some steam. So he left the house. Did he run away? No, he just went around the block, came back.
I was totally out of breath, too.
You had a big block, though, at your house.
It was a big block, yes. Yes, right. Yeah, I remember that. Made quite an impact. But anyway, that one and only time. But the word evildoers, people who just are bent on wickedness and evil. They're the evil doers. And the same instruction toward these that they were surrounded by is the same instruction to us. Fret not thyself because of evildoers. Why is it? Because there's always going to be evildoers. You're not going to get rid of them. They are you might say, a staple in our culture, a staple in every society. As Andrew mentioned this morning in his devotion, reading the news headlines, these evildoers, and I believe it's the Apostle Peter said, will wax worse and worse. Or maybe it was Paul. It will wax worse and worse. It's not that the evildoers have never been around. They have been around. They're mentioned here in the Psalms. But as we get closer to the time of the Lord, as Paul described it, as a woman having birth pains, they're going to pick up with intensity, and they're going to become closer together as that day of delivery approaches. And so evildoers will grow worse and worse. Lawlessness will be the order of the day. Kind of an oxymoron. Lawlessness will be the order of the day. But I've heard our present administration characterized as one of lawlessness. Breaking laws left and right. Not following the Constitution. Not doing things the way that earlier presidents pretty much had done. Although all of them have violated things along the way. But just when you're characterized as lawless, that just decries the times that we live in. Fret not thyself. So you have evildoers. They're going to be on board. They're going to be ever present. So it's not so. The focus here isn't on the evildoers. That's a given. The focus seems to be on our interaction or response to the evildoers about us. He says, fret not thyself because of it. Neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity. And so we're not supposed to be overly worked up, overly anxious, overly insecure, or full of unrest because of all that's going on around us. Now, I know that's easy to say. I've told you before in the past that I've had to back off on listening to talk radio. I haven't quit altogether. I do listen to Mark Levine and occasionally Michael Savage. But I have had to back off quite a bit because I can easily get worked up as to the things that they're pointing out, and they're privy to a lot of information that, of course, we aren't. And they bring the news to us, and they discuss it, they digest it. But there for a while, I was getting pretty worked up over it. And I had to check that because if this is prophesied, the evildoer is waxing worse and worse. If there would be a breakdown in society, if that was all foretold, and we happen to be living in it, then why am I getting all worked up, Andrew? It doesn't make sense, does it? Well, it didn't make sense. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that I never get worked up. I still, pound the steering wheel once in a while. No, I'm just kidding. Pound the steering wheel. But I still get a little upset when he points out, a lot of the inconsistencies. Especially, don't get me started, Philip. Especially the border crisis. It just doesn't make sense. That's why we have locks on the doors in our homes. To keep the bad people out. Not to keep the good people in. Keep the bad people out. Okay? So let's just keep our doors unlocked.
Canada?
Yeah.
You're really afraid of Canadians.
Yeah, we're afraid of those Canadians. Philip's favorite saying is Canada. What went wrong?
Well, no one's answered that.
No one's answered that. Right. But it's on our shoulders. And so much of the scriptures, in our dealings with people, it's not on the people in general that he's talking about, because they're going to, as we say, get theirs. Okay? And we're not going to be the ones giving it to them. The responsibility is always put on our shoulders on how we react to this. It's always us. And so he's saying, don't let this get you, out of sorts. Don't get worked up over it. And don't, for sure, don't entertain that maybe you want to go that way because you're envious. Don't even think about that. And then he says quickly, he follows up quickly against, don't be envious against the workers of iniquity, for they shall soon be cut down. So if you're even thinking of going that direction, then you better reconsider, because God has his eye on the evildoers. And whereas it's not your job to cut them down, it is God's. And so he reminds us, they shall soon be cut down like the grass and wither as the green herb. So they're not going to get away with their evil doing. Okay? But it's not on our shoulders to do that. But it is to react properly. But he has given us, as he says, don't do something. Don't do this. He replaces that would otherwise be a vacuum with something good. So he says, this is what you do. You trust in the Lord and do good. Well, that's opposite of evil. We are to be do-gooders as opposed to being evil-doers. We are to be doers of good. And so he gives us an incentive. Those are your orders and your comparison. But then he says, he gives us an incentive. So shalt thou dwell in the land, and verily thou shalt be fed. So you don't need to envy the evildoers who are out there making the big bucks. You stick with me, and I'll see to it that your needs are taken care of. You don't need to chase those pipe dreams, and you don't need to go after the gods and the godless. So he says, but then there's more. So there's something not to do, and then to fill that vacuum, he gives us something to do. Okay? But then there's also emotion or attitude in this, so lest it become just out of mechanics. He said, delight thyself also in the Lord. And so it's not just a matter of raw trust as a robot. Okay? It's, while you're trusting, you are to develop an emotional sense as well. You are to, and we said this so many times, you are to fuse your emotions in with your faith. So that your faith, just as emotions aren't going anywhere, you're not going to get rid of emotions. That's who you are. That's part of who you are. And so they're not going anywhere. Okay? So what you want to do is combine your emotions with your faith, because your faith could go somewhere. Your faith could take a powder. Your faith could leave. It could be shipwrecked. Okay? You could leave your faith. Okay? So what you want to do is stabilize that faith with something that's already anchored in your heart and your soul, and that's your emotions. So you want to wrap your faith around those emotions and bind them like a tight rope, okay, so that they're held intact. Delight thyself in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. So there is something to be said for bonding with God emotionally. He's going to be right there rewarding that commitment. Speaking of which, in verse 5, commit thy way unto the Lord. So this is a long-term situation. The relationship that he wants to develop with us, first of all, he has to kind of capture our gaze and our focus off of evildoers onto him, okay, with a complete trust. And then an incentive, or correct with the emotions, and then an incentive. Commit thy way unto the Lord, trust in him also, and he shall bring it to pass. Confidence in our God. Now, is that to say that God answers every prayer the way you want it to turn out? I can't say that. I can't say that with confidence. It doesn't always work that way. Why is that? You ever ask yourself, I pray for a certain situation, and I'm praying, as I see it, with my understanding, for it to happen or develop or result in a certain way. So I'm casting my care on the Lord, and I've got something in mind, taking my supplication to God, and I've got a conclusion all wrapped up with it. And so I throw it up to God in prayer. Here it is, Lord, beginning, middle, and ending. Here it is. See what you can do with this one. Sometimes Sister Linda comes back with a no. It comes back with a no. So why is that? Well, two reasons that I see. One, there was something mixed in with that request that God spotted right away, and it wasn't honoring to him. It was more of a what would you call it, serving or whatever. It was a bad thread woven in there. Okay? The other thing is, if it involves other people, we don't have control over those other people. And so you have two things working against you. A bad thread in your own heart woven into that prayer. And God says, no. Or your prayer concerns the decisions of other people which you have no control over. And so you might pray to a certain end, but God has to take everything into consideration when he listens to your prayer. Your prayer, even if it's right and true and pure, but also the hearts of the people you're praying for. Okay? On their end, maybe there's decisions they have to make. Maybe there's things they have to avoid in order for your prayer to be answered. And so there's a lot of dynamics going on here. So it's not always the way we pray. It doesn't always turn out that way. Classic example would be Israel. Jeremiah and the other prophets were sent to, and they prayed for these people. They prayed and they prayed and they prayed for them to turn from idolatry and from becoming a nation of evildoers. The evildoers he's talking about aren't the Babylonians, by the way. The evildoers he's talking about were right within their borders. The society had collapsed, it had broken down. And so they looked all around them. Their neighbors and their friends and businessmen and associates and family were crumbling. He said, don't let that discourage you from trusting God. Okay? So it was their own people. He says, you keep trusting, and he shall bring it to pass. And so there are times where we don't have full control over this. And really, do we want full control? Because everything has to be balanced. And I don't want my prayers to throw everything off balance. God has to consider everybody and everything in every case. And that's how he responds and that's how he acts. But I want to say this too. Have you ever prayed a prayer and you were driven, you were motivated, you were directed by the Spirit of God to pray a prayer? It's like God directed your attention to a certain need or something, and he got you focused on it. And then lo and behold, it was answered. You know what I think that's happening there is God saw your heart, knew what he was going to do. He was going to bring in that answer from the side, okay? But he had to prepare you before its arrival. Because what you were praying for was for the will of God. Okay? So God said, okay, my will. Okay, that's good. Good intentions, good motives, good. Okay, everything's check, check, check. Okay, so he's going to bring that answer in, and he's already prepared you to pray for it. So when it is answered, you're going to thank God because you were prepped, you were praying for it, and you're going to thank God for answering it, okay, because you did it the right way. So he prepares the prayer, the person praying, and the prayer with the answer, and they match up perfectly, and he gets the honor and the glory. That's really the ideal. So if he says no in a particular situation, then there's a reason for it, and he has a good reason. He has a good reason. In verse 6, and you shall bring forth thy righteousness as the light, and thy judgment as the noonday. It looks bleak now. Looks dark. Looks hopeless. But you stick with God, and you commit your way. You commit your way to Him, and one day He will bring that level of commitment and that invisible trust. He'll bring it and display it and showcase it where others can see it. Of course, the obvious there is when He dresses that person in a bridal gown and gives them a new name and a white stone. It'd be pretty obvious, okay? But He's saying here, you shall bring forth your righteousness as the light, and thy judgment as the noonday. Rest in the Lord, and wait patiently for Him. Fret not thyself because of him who prospereth in his way, because of the man who bringeth wicked devices to pass. Now that's twice he said this. This is twice he said this. Now why is he hammering on this one? Because that's our inclination. Our inclination is we throw God a bone, we kind of, worship Him a little, give an effort, and then things don't work out, and we throw our hands up in discouragement and despair. And we look around, we say, he's not serving the Lord. Look how successful that person is. And so we get discouraged that we've been serving the Lord, and look where it has gotten us. Well, that's a whole other psalm. That's Psalm 73, by the way. We might even take a look at that. I think, Philip, that is that 73? Okay. Remind me, we might even go there, okay? So he's mentioned this twice now. Rest in the Lord. Wait patiently for Him. Fret not thyself because of him who prospers in his way, because of the man who bringeth wicked devices to pass. Well, another emotion that he's trying to rein in on his people. Cease from anger, and forsake wrath. Fret not thyself in any wise to do evil. Stop listening to talk radio. Oh wait, it doesn't say that.
But it should.
But it should. But it should. And so I have to. You got to rein it in, because it didn't make sense when I know these things and I preach these things, for years about the unrest the world would find itself in the last days. I mean, right out of the scriptures. And then to get caught up in it. To get caught up in the politics and the immorality. I'm not saying don't like it. No, yeah, we have to hate it. We have to hate it. That helps keep us in the lane. But at the same time, everything has to be balanced. So he says, don't get caught up in this, because if you are caught up in anger and wrath, you're setting yourself up to take vengeance yourself and to act in the place of God, and to overstep God's authority and God's boundaries, okay? Where He says, rest in Him and be patient, okay? When I'm angry, I lose patience, and now I want to do it now and my way and not wait for God. So what He's doing is He's putting a check on His people as they respond to what's going on around them. Okay? This is very, very crucial, because this is lessons for God's people, okay? For evildoers, fret not thyself to imitate, to do evil. For evildoers shall be cut off. Another reminder. Again, if he's going to repeat the instruction for us to handle things, he's got to repeat the reason that we check our emotions. Reminding us again, for evildoers shall be cut off. But those that wait upon the Lord, stay in their lane, they shall what? I like this part. They shall inherit the earth. You mean the earth that the evildoers have seemingly taken over? Yes, that one. You mean the ones where they're spreading, is that Psalm 1? They're spreading like a green bay tree. Evil everywhere. Yeah, that's the one. So what the Bible is encouraging us is you hold on, you hang on tight with the Lord, because the evil activity, and they've taken over the world with their evil, one day you're going to get all of their work. Kind of reminds me when Israel stepped into the promised land. He said, look, it's a turnkey operation. I'm handing it over to you. Here's the keys. There's wells already dug, waiting for you. Fresh water. Vineyards already planted. Fresh grapes. Okay? Everything that you could want is basically a turnkey operation. And so those who inherit the earth are going to inherit the works, or what's left of them after we come through the tribulation and God's shaking the earth, and the mountains are leveled and all this. What's left of it, of course, they're going to be cleaning up a lot of rubble. And I think, what does it say in the Old Testament, that there's 6 months or 7 months of cleaning up the weaponry, from the battles. There's going to be, of course, there's dead bodies everywhere. There are dead bodies all over the planet. And they're having to bury them. I think it's 6 or 7 months to bury the bodies. And so God is going to shake, those snow globes? It says God is going to shake the earth. And it's going to reel back and forth like a drunkard. Very unsteady. Okay, he's going to shake it. It says, once more I shake not only shake not only the heavens, but the earth also. Okay? So he says, you hang in there. Because the evildoers are going to come to an end by the hand of God. And those that wait, verse 9, those that wait upon the Lord, they shall inherit the earth. For yet a little while, and the wicked shall not be. Again, he's emphasizing this. You don't want to switch lanes and go in their lane, because that lane will lead to death. Yea, thou shalt diligently consider his place, and it shall not be. But the meek shall inherit the earth. It says it again. The meek, the ones that rode with God, that stayed with God, that listened to these instructions. Putting a check on their negative emotions that otherwise would derail them, for the sake of God and for the sake of these promises, for the sake of this vision, they held tight with God. Okay? And the meek shall inherit the earth. Verse 18, I believe I have a note here, says forever. Let's just fast forward to 18. The Lord knows the days of the upright, and their inheritance shall be forever. So they will inherit the earth forever, and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace. Well, if we look at what's going on now, there is no peace in the world. The world has no peace. This world is so full of unrest right now. And I'm not talking just the Middle East. Of course, what they're doing is now spreading. I could not believe that I read, was it Oklahoma? I could not believe that. This is insane. Oh, I'm getting worked up, sorry. I feel myself getting worked up. But really, it's insane when they're bringing this stuff from the Middle East, what's going on over there, and they're bringing it right within our own borders. And you know what I'm talking about, don't you, without having to say it. About that woman. Okay. If you're not sure, I'll tell you, but I don't want to say it right now. But it is insane. But the wicked are going to be no more. You'll consider what happened to them. Okay. But the meek will inherit the earth, and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace, which is opposite of what we're facing today. The wicked plotteth against the just, the righteous, and gnashes upon him with his teeth. He doesn't appreciate that he's righteous. He doesn't appreciate that he's trying to do good and that he would not do him harm. Doesn't appreciate that at all. Whenever there's a confrontation of East and West, it's two different cultures. We think we wear the white hats and we're trying to be the nice guys. You know, it's played by the rules of war and all this that were laid down in the other world wars, the conventions of war. We're fighting an enemy that doesn't know about that. They don't care about that. Life is meaningless to them. They don't look at life like we look at life. And so here again, it's all by the hand of God. It has to create this this vacuum of understanding from one hemisphere to the other. The wicked plotteth against the just and gnashes upon him with his teeth. The Lord shall laugh at him. Again, it doesn't matter what the wicked are doing. It's what the wicked are going to end up. The Lord shall laugh at him, for he seeth that his day is coming. The wicked have drawn out the sword, and have bent their bow to cast down the poor and needy, and to slay such as be of upright conversation. There's always been this controversy between the righteous and the unrighteous, and it always will be. We just want to make sure that we follow these instructions so that no matter what happens, we'll always stay with the Lord. But then he reminds us, I don't care how aggressive they are, the upper hand that they have, it says, their sword shall enter into their own heart, and their bows shall be broken. A little that a righteous man hath is better than the riches of many wicked. He has to drive this point home because our flesh nature would have a tendency to see the success of the wicked and want to, entertain that notion. And so he says, don't go there. Don't even think about it. Don't even step onto that path. Think of Proverbs 7 about the young man. Someone was watching out their window, and they said it was at night, in the evening, a bunch of young people hanging out down at the mini mart there, or whatever. And he says, I spied a young man, void of understanding. And he said, this as they, departed, he left the group and started walking toward his home, and there she was to intercept him and to seduce him. Okay? Void of understanding. She caught him. And so that's the warnings in the scriptures, not to be caught by that. Okay? Their sword shall enter into their own heart, and their bow shall be broken. A little that a righteous man hath is better than the riches of many wicked. For the arms of the wicked shall be broken. How many times does he have to say the same thing? I guess as many times as it takes. But the Lord upholdeth the righteous. The Lord knoweth the days of the upright, and their inheritance shall be forever. They shall not be ashamed in the evil time, and in the days of famine they shall be satisfied. I think of our Anabaptist brethren, and I think of this one brother, I think it was John Leland. You ever do research on John Leland? I think Brother Ward said that the way he met his death in this country was that they cast him out into the winter cold, there to freeze to death. Basically naked to freeze to death. And so that man died that way. And a lot of our brethren died horrible, horrible deaths. So what is he saying here? They shall not be ashamed in evil time, and in the days of famine they shall be satisfied. God's people can be starved. These things can come upon them. But the psalmist is looking overall that no matter what they go through, they're going to end up being satisfied with the results, with the outcome. There were a lot of beheadings. There were a lot of, torture and murder. So some of them met their death in that way. But God doesn't look at death like we look at death. To him, the death of his people, it's a beautiful thing because they're walking through the door into his presence. It's just, death is just a door. It's the means to go from one room called earth to the next room called heaven. Okay? It's just a door. Okay? And so precious to the Lord are the death of his saints, because that means they're coming right directly into his presence. So overall, step back to see the whole big picture. God has his eye on his people. So, as you look at verse 22. Oh, no, look, where did I skip? 20. But the wicked shall perish, and the enemies of the Lord shall be as the fat of lambs. They shall consume into smoke, they shall be consumed away. The wicked borroweth and payeth not again, but the righteous showeth mercy and giveth. So there's just certain characteristics that separate the two, okay, in this life. And finally, verse 23, or 22. For such as be blessed of him shall inherit the earth, and they that be cursed of him shall be cut off. And so we're going to stop there, and maybe next week we'll look at the rest of it. But again, he's showing two groups. Those that want to serve him and love him and embrace him even amidst the turmoil around them, and those that are all caught up in the world and caught up in the affairs of life and such. And the Lord is not on their lips in that way. So we want to stay on the good path, the narrow way that leads unto life. That's our task. We've been tasked with that. We've also been tasked with sharing that good news with others. Okay, so shall we stand this morning?